Greetings and welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and lore, sky and star, earth and embodiment through astrology, art, and spirit engagement. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. The tomb chamber, pregnant with bone, fills the void to unknown extent. The lid stone rolls shut with a satisfying click, and all within is immersed in darkness. Or so we believe, but do not know. The slabs of stone descend as stairs, level that reach into caverns below, the walls around the vast space chiseled from soft volcanic rock into rectangular reliefs, inset with busts of those great few that came before and set down the cornerstones from which our history has been stacked. The beauty of their features static, stays in cold, dry wait for a time that never comes, kissed by black air and caressed by the absence of breeze, only the slow and silent drafts of exhaling crypts which softly lift to keep some sort of time for the sake of long memories that stack upon the desk of fate like so many leaves and layers. The ripe flesh and flushed cheeks and exaltation of skin on skin, of draping silk, of luscious fruit, languid days passing the time with sweet melodies and luxurious seats, surrounded by bloom, perfume, and gentle skies. All of this is fleeting. We are moist, embodied for moments, and then brittle, desiccation forever, like the brief succulent bud set in a skeletal flower. The architecture around us tells us this, and the hard reality it portrays, brick upon brick and stone upon stone, stacks up to a story that only enhances the beauty and vamps up the value of our precious few sips of the elixirs of life and short-lived feast where we sink our teeth into the succulent fronds of earth's delights. Sometimes, caught in the cogs and brackets and stop-start push and pull of the machine working away upon the treadmill of affairs, of trials and tribulations, we receive short windows between whistle blows, brief retreat and respite, waiting for the steel arm to come around and arrive at our station, where we have the chance to indulge ourselves in all our senses and lose our cares in the full ecstasy of existence. If we ignore our bodies and tarry too long or hesitate, we might miss these perfect windows of escape between the sandwich stones of inescapable obligation. Like erotic bondage, these restraints can amplify our pleasure and render our desires most acute. Such limitations on our minds can cause our ideas and interests to multiply and even divide and diverge on opposite courses, wondering which way we should go if we can only have so much time or so much resources to do so. There's so much to pursue that what or which shall we choose? Our curiosity escalates in courses. If our time is limited and the machinations of our world will ultimately chew us up in the end, from dust to dust, we must then protect our nests and larders from harm or any other infiltration. If there's only so much time or money to have a good time and enjoy the good life, then we are driven to lock tight the pantry and guard it with whatever artillery we might muster. Thus we become hedonistic, opportunistic, and moody. We brood. We take advantage of what comes our way. We are receptive, deceptive, intuitive, selfish, sensual, and pragmatic all at once. Our minds race as we try to maximize our satisfactions. Under the pressures of our obligations, the need to reduce our systems, and the looming cloud bank of unknowns, the very storm cloud of fears we obsess over that may or may not ever come and obscure our fortifications and speculative futures. We need to radicalize our understanding and approach to material culture, to creative growth, to preparing for fertility, to sensuality itself. How we experience pleasure must be revolutionized, as what delivered us material satisfaction before is quickly becoming defunct. If we are going to have our cake and eat it too, if we are not going to be doomed to choose A over B, if we are going to be non-binary and fluid between the paradoxical ends of antithesis, We need to look to new imaginative philosophies and hybridization that inspire and motivate us towards our most ultimate and noble goals. Holy ideals, sacred targets. We need divinely inspired optimism in the face of our inescapably bleak situations. Not because we are naive, but because we are also authors of our own personalities, as well as the collective narrative. Not by our votes alone and our bureaucratic contributions and civil voice, but by the fact that we project into the future before us helps sculpt the events we experience. It is not only our own petty annihilation at stake, but the pleasure of the universe itself, experiences through us and our own senses. We must radicalize our own love and lust, not for the sake of overindulgence, but for a more sensual reality that resonates with the actual divine. We must learn how to mythologize our own existence, to see reality as a story, and begin to merge components and create chimeras. We may rise swiftly across the thresholds of shadow into unfinished futures, unknown natures, and oncoming epochs. Mars spends his time throughout the month of June in Cancer, which he ingressed on May 15th and will remain until July 1st. This is where Mars finds his fall, and a particular trap is set for how he normally functions. Mars, who is normally tactical, critical, responsive, confident, capable, and effective, is clouded over by emotional concerns and attachments. He may decide to retaliate because his feelings are hurt, and be overprotective of people, places, and things, which carry sentimental content. Passive aggression is possible, as are civil wars or the turning of blades inward to spar with family and others in close proximity to your primary cares. We could find ourselves fighting for or with our mothers, both literally and metaphorically, as well as protecting our pet projects, the growth of our more sensitive creations, in an attempt to preserve ideal conditions and preferred parameters, even if it comes to blows. And this extends to keeping intruders away from our food and most comfortable furniture. Seeing someone in our own bunks snacking on our supplies might set us off and blow the bugle for taking up arms against the intruder. Mercury splashes into the pool early in the month, putting our analytical minds into the affairs and triggering Uranus's influence and radicalizing and wanting to revolutionize what foods and material things even are, surely puts on experimental edge and volatile ingredient into the mixture. And some of the useful information which is beginning to emerge from such experiments shows up as data along the way. Both Mars and Mercury trine Neptune mid-month, as our thoughts and actions begin to mobilize towards shared objectives, but in a way that is likely to have our emotions diluting us in illusion and finding ourselves fighting within fantasies. Simultaneously, the two planets oppose Saturn, and our concerns for growth, needs, safety, and the resources necessary to develop are met with a hard stare from obligations and inescapable restrictions. The trick is to put our protection of growth and respect to responsibilities in balance. Although it's both malefics, so it will be all challenge and no playing nice. Steer the ship towards productivity and minimize damages, and you might find yourself in a better situation than before the storm arrived, despite having to choose losses along the way. Then the opposition immediately turns to K2 and Pluto. This pivots upon Rahu, the very head of the dragon. We may see a situation where we need to purge and prune our constructions, while meanwhile we become insatiably hungry to grow and amass more resources to do so. Our emotions can easily go into terrible tantrums here. Losing our heads may be unavoidable, so make sure you are away from sensitive places and people and direct the deluge into something useful. Pluto adds both overwhelming fear and ignorable obsession to the equation, but use the layers of shadow to satisfy your inner detective and attempt to be investigatory rather than the victim of a conspiratorial avalanche. Mars is in triplicity here, so despite being too upset to be direct and clear, he might still have his heart in the right place, and his intuitions may be correct, even though his methods are more sloppy than is helpful. Protecting and defending what we need to grow and be safe and properly nurtured is a just cause. We have to be aware and monitor when we are being smart and strategic, and when we are being simply a dangerous baby with a loaded gun. Venus remains in rulership until late evening on the 8th. beginning our month with an awareness of how pleasure, beauty, and sensuality must be prioritized in both a world and in a season where there's only so much good stuff going around, and we should absolutely learn to enjoy it while it lasts. But also preserve it so that it remains intact, is renewable and not wasted or destroyed out of negligence or neglect. Saturn wants to ration, reduce, limit, and render lasting and enduring, while Venus in late Taurus understands that just because the soil is fertile doesn't mean that crops will withstand pests or blight. Enjoy it while it lasts, and in fact adhere to a strict guideline so that it absolutely does. Pluto's influence may put the fear in us, in a good way. Manage things accordingly, or else the party's over. And Ketu says along the way, you'll have to lose this, and this, and this, or else your aesthetics will be polluted. With planets making aspects to recently stationed and now retrograde Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, we may feel as though storylines in our lives and in the world at large have come to a standstill. The plot somehow hit a snag, and it appears that things are not moving along as they once were. This is exacerbated by the pileup of Saturn, Ketu, and Pluto in Capricorn, which have us lost in a void where things of inconceivable magnitude need to be dealt with for an indefinite amount of time, many of these issues needing pruning, shedding, or dismantling before there can be a new flow and growth. In a sense, the film is on pause, but in that moment of still picture, we have the opportunity to make very direct and specific alterations and familiarize ourselves in depth with areas that are currently pinned down, or for better or worse. What we are currently doing is dealing with some heavy and neglected stuff. For many, these are actual solid slabs which have physical weight and measurable proportions. It's tough work, but the goal is to get through it, or enough of it, to be on the other side by the time the conveyor belt of time roars once more to a start. No one likes dead-stop traffic on the freeway, but if there are fires to put out or major adjustments to be made within the car, then having a brief pause is more than appreciated. I've talked about this before, but how often we wished everything could just stop for a second. But once it does, our instinctual reaction is to panic and put all our energy into trying to get the boulder rolling again. Yes, getting things in motion will take some of our own effort, but a strategic adjustment to the slow pace has its own advantages. You might monitor other people's progress to contrast it against your own. If everyone seems to be creeping along at 5 miles per hour, then you are probably allowed to give yourself some rest and not waste your energy paddling between winds. It's probably more wise to check all your rigging and tidy up the cabin while you wait for the next session of more mobile weather. Unfortunately, the retrograde motion adds to the feeling that you are losing ground. As the outer planets all roll backwards through the zodiac, we might find ourselves returning to topics from yesterday, last month, late last year. Consider this also as an opportunity to make adjustments and make sure you are on the trajectory you intended to be on and reset yourself to right your course and true your aim when our doubling back has come to a close. This is not the jerky ride Mercury or Mars retrogrades deliver, but slow tidal motions of enormous outer planets. We want to be with the long ebb and flow of their cycles. It's a time now to reduce and to understand, to be clear and not overburdened, even if that means laboring through a purgation process for the time being to reach a clean and stable building site buried beneath, and be ready with refreshed and updated plans for construction later in the summer. Let's get the conditions right before we rush into idealistic, risky, or complicated new projects. June begins with Mercury in late and the Sun in early Gemini, kicking things off with an investigatory orientation. We're curious and considering many different options and exploring a variety of ideas. Mercury quickly switches into Cancer by June 4th. We're expressing our emotions and turning our investigations toward what we might need to feel safe, what nourishment we might require for growth. This emotional overlay colors the Sun's glasses in Gemini's intellectual territory, and the keys in a tone persistent throughout 2019 as the North Node, or Rahu, is currently in mid to late Cancer, rendering themes of growth, need, emotion, nurturing, safety, nest, care, and intuition with a particular urgency. We may need to recharge on mother's milk and spend some time in the safety of the crib to balance out the hard realities and tough purgations of the Saturn Ketu Pluto project. This can also have us hungry for the world and growing too fast for comfort. Our clothes no longer fit. Our bedrooms no longer suit us. Our current collections of tools seem like mere toys. We're held back in preschool, but feel we are ready for PhD programs. It'd be best at least to identify what our ideal conditions for stable and steady growth are and prioritize them, especially to contextualize what dismantle in the concrete dimension, rather than reach too quickly for toys too delicate for us to play with or foods we are too underdeveloped to digest. In Gemini, the sun will be taking in all this information through so many Google searches and conversations and library books and magazine articles to try to find stimulating and potential pathways. Venus enters the twin sign June 8th and spends the month helping us be chatty, charming, eclectic, curious, and attracted to information, taking pleasure in factoids and drawn to making artful multimedia collages with what we find, some of which may dilate massively and become more illuminating as they increase in scope, as all three planets will oppose Jupiter 3/4 of the way through the sign, and also send us down a rabbit hole of confused and clashing data as they square Neptune almost simultaneously. There is you have to get extremely lost and hopelessly confused first to find yourself ultimately to the wisest solution dynamic afoot here. So beware and employ some tactical indifference to delusion and derailment as things oversaturate, then seem to somehow sort themselves out before your eyes. You want to be ready to pluck the right pieces from the pool as they surface, and then assemble your strategy from what solid stuff remains. The full moon in Sagittarius occurs just after 4 a.m. EST on Monday the 17th. This is the moon juicing up to fullness, still separating from conjunction with the greater benefic in his day sect domicile. We might want to ready ourselves to ride the mythological humidity, water, moon, and fiery Sagittarius into copious cups of abundance. Jupiter is likely to overbrim the cornucopia here, which may manifest physically, as you might be privy to a fantastic feast, but of the sort which fills the bellows which stoke your heart as much as your belly. In this I mean a feast for the spirit, an accumulation of inspirational victuals and motivational mincemeats, the Holy Grail seeming in sight by night's impressionistic perspective. We feel our intuition's ability to feel our way toward our goals and press all the malleable pieces together into one ideal composite that can meet and overcome the challenges by instinct alone. I would suggest preparing feasts to invite inspiration and opportunity in, to drink and make merry until you are much wiser and retiring than you were when approaching the table, to feast on wisdom and inspiration itself rather than wine and food, such as gorging on literature and performing arts or religious retreat, or literally taking your tarot deck to the dockside and summoning the crustacean depicted in the surface for a devotional seaside feast of shellfish, butter, bread, and brine. Both Mercury and Mars can join Rahu here, and though that means they also oppose Capricorn complex of Saturn, Ketu, and Pluto, they will be very much with the dragon's head, sharing his experience of insatiable hunger, in this case in full view of what serious and scary possibilities and potentials our current days portend. This in a way sounds very high Renaissance. Life is short, enjoy it while it lasts. Well, welcome back, Bonnie.
Hello, how are you?
Good. After a pretty long break.
Time.
Yeah, I think when we first started doing this show, it was on the radio, and we were doing it once a week, like a once a week forecast, and then it became a once a month show.
And now it's once a year.
Yeah. It became a once a month show, but with lots of guests, and life got really disruptive for a few months, which makes sense, with looking at the astrology. I guess I can really see it now, how it's really affected by that Venus ingress into Uranus, and I don't need to go too much into my own nativity, but I really got disrupted, and now I'm back and maybe better for it. Now we're probably going to do the return of these forecast episodes, and then also try to have frequent guests, maybe once a week, maybe 3 a month, something like that, and artists, magicians, astrologers, etc. So maybe it's going to be a better show from having
that time off.
Having
perspective.
that time knocked off my my proverbial horse or whatever.
Right. Right.
But now we're back. So ciao, Bonnie.
Ciao,
ragazzi. And we've got a really action-packed month this month. Astrologers have been talking about how nasty June looks for a while, and how it's kind of like a grind, like a preview of July's eclipse cycle season. But we just get a lot of oppositions, a lot of squares, a lot of eclipse axis contact. So yeah, we get a lot of sensitivity. The centerpiece of it kind of being Mars and Cancer and everything that implies, which we'll go into. But I figured since there's so many things come down the line, it might be good to kind of go through them in order.
That's a good idea.
Unless you have any
I love
questions.
that orderly,
Orderly.
Yeah, chronological.
Totally, that good chronological shit.
Yeah, we're not on the radio.
No, we're not on the radio anymore, and the
want.
podcast is explicit, right?
Yeah.
It's like I put it as explicit because why would you be anything except for explicit?
Well, you want to have options.
Yeah, well, I don't mean necessarily to cuss and curse, but explicit, mark that yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, what's the opposite of explicit? Implicit? Kind of passive aggressive? Or I guess that with it artfully, that could be puns and witticisms,
Witticisms.
So we enter the month, and I've been thinking about this too, as an astrologer looking at cycles of time and the movement of planets. You're the constructs of our calendar months and a lot of the calendar in general is total poppycock, these blocks that we put names to. But if you think about the project of June, June as everyone's doing June, so it still sort of exists. You can get an electional chart or basically a nativity, a natal chart of June,
And weather-wise, there's weather associated with this region in June.
Yeah, totally. People believe in June.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing.
It conjures up specifics, like lilacs blooming.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, when you think June, stuff happens in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that necessarily for this. On June 1st, we get the moon conjunct Venus. So it is, if you want to think of what's in the natal chart of June, you get the moon applying to Venus in the sign of the moon's exaltation and Venus's rulership. So we do get kind of this initial nice aspect for June generally, but we get all the nasty stuff applying too. But we might as well try to see if we can remember throughout June as things move forward that organic pace and rhythm finding its footing in being provided for aesthetically and materially and in a state of luxury, which I've been really feeling with the Venus in Taurus this time around. I just can't really stop eating delicious food and drinking wine, as hard as I don't try, I guess. Which wasn't the case last year. I felt like I was doing a lot of the Saturn in Capricorn, not doing gluten, not doing dairy and or meat and doing a lot of kind of dieta to meet different herbs and getting really stripped down. But I think with this Jupiter in Sagittarius, it's really rolled me into a kind of feasting friar kind of state.
And we had made those Jupiter talismans, and they really they didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, that's I've heard it before. People if people have Jupiter transit through the first house, gaining weight is often sometimes a thing, like getting larger, to
Expanding.
yeah, to mythological proportions. And I grew a giant beard, which I heard that's a thing too, and I was like, oh yeah, wow, that happened to me, like looking more Zeus-like. But then we made these Jupiter talismans, and lo and behold, like we traveled. We went overseas and started eating like tons of delicious food, and it just hasn't ceased. So we had to put them in the drawer for a minute so that we could get a control of our beach bodies for 2019.
Which, like, what we want for ourselves, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Like, what we feel comfortable being.
Yeah, totally.
Everybody, has their own concept of beach body ready.
Yeah, but it's like there should be the disclaimer on the Jupiter talisman, like you're going to become. There could be more mass like than before.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got like right at the beginning of June, we have Venus trine Pluto, and that's like interesting to step in with that. Because Venus isn't going to be in Taurus for very long. Within the month, like she goes into Gemini on the 8th, and so. She conjoined Pluto earlier in the year, like on late February, on like February 21st or something like that. And now we get like the harmonized perspective from later, where it's like it might like look back to topics from before and kind of like have a more kind of like harmonious view, or how those topics that might have like darker aesthetics and kind of like loss of like certain things that you took a lot of pleasure in and things that you really loved, or loss of something particularly Venusian in your life. And now looking at it from this angle, it might be like, oh well, like that can kind of like one can go with the other and be perfectly in tune from this perspective, and like what like it's like a lot. The note I took is like awareness of how fleeting and valuable sensuality, fertility, luxury, and beauty can be in harmony with fears and voids in management of the system or structure of nature, like how you manage your life, how like the obstacles and limits that nature provides. Like there's only so much water available in this region or something, so we can only make this much delicious meat. But how those things, it's Venus in rulership. So I talked a lot about this last month, as we had so many things going through Taurus, that kind of when you face these like restrictions from Saturn and need to kind of cut back from the South Node and kind of like fears of the unknown, or like need to like investigate more, like kind of grope in the darkness from Pluto, it's kind of, since there's only so much available, there's only so much like wattage in the cottage, you might as well turn the electricity off and like enjoy a candle, it makes like the sensual, like kind of sexual, artistic, kind of luxurious, sumptuous things, like just enjoying, like watching the fireflies, like like wine, sex, like drugs, art, like the dimension of it that's like sort of free for the taking is a lot more energy efficient than trying to make big plans, big constructions, spend a lot of money on materials, and waste a lot of resources on energy expenditure.
Absolutely.
So that kind of, we step into the month still with that very present. And then on Monday the 3rd, we have a new moon in Gemini. And so it's like kind of initiating a new cycle that's seeded with curiosity and paradox and divergent ideas and information branching out and opposed concepts. And the sun's already been in Gemini since like the 21st or 20th or 21st of May. So we've got some Gemini going on, and Mercury's already in Gemini. So Gemini's in full swing, but then we get this new moon there. It's like we start to like plant seeds within that space of like lots of information, which I've definitely really felt this Gemini season, as people say, this time around. Like lots of transaction, lots of communication, lots of new ideas coming out of nowhere that just be like, ooh, well, I got to look into that. And it's a whole like Google wormhole. Like I started reading a new book right around the time planets started going to Gemini. And instead of taking notes in the notebook, I just started being like, oh, well, that's interesting. Things that would come up in the research. And I'd just open another window in my phone. And within like 20 minutes of beginning this new book, I had like 30 like windows open in Safari on my phone of things that I needed to like look into and research more, you know.
What's the book?
It's called Delirious Naples.
I figured people would want to know.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, it's the cultural history of the city of the sun. So...
we have the Italy bug in case...
Yeah, totally.
You didn't see this.
Right. Yeah, we're infected. That's what it goes into, is being infected with Parthenopeanism, basically. So be careful, you know. So then, like... So this new moon in Gemini is going to like really, because that means new moon in Gemini means full moon in Sagittarius later in the season. So this kind of blossoming, the seeding with Mercury in rulership in Gemini to a blossoming with Jupiter in rulership in Sagittarius goes across the month. So we get this like Venus rulership, moon exaltation thing right in the beginning. We get this signature of like Mercury like bringing in lots of like information that's getting us really excited, and then this kind of like overbrimming of abundance and inspirational optimism later, even though we get this like a lot of like kind of harsh, hard grind throughout the center of it, you know. So it's an interesting combination of aspects. And
you think it will be preparing us, or that maybe we can take this month and be kind of strengthening those muscles to help us prepare for what's coming in July?
Yeah. It's definitely going to be like a lot of the same topics and themes, just like like a lot of the parade across Cancer is gonna like trigger a lot of the details that are going to become topics throughout the eclipse season. Things that are just kind of like coming up now is like, oh, that's the kind of grind I'm getting into. That's the thing I'm defending. That's the territory that I want to protect. That's the obstacle that I've been dealing with. And some of these are long themes, like all of the stuff that's been in Capricorn for the past couple of years, with Saturn and Pluto the past few years. And then when the nodes go in there, it's like becomes really highlighted. And so it's what's like on the other side of the spectrum from that, what's in Cancer gets to express within June and then really come to a head in July. So it's all the like the construction and the blueprints and the obstacles in our life, just the hard Saturn kind of stuff. All those components, like on the other side of the seesaw from those is like what we need to feel safe, what we need to grow, what we need to be nurtured. All these things that we might have been like denying ourselves the past couple of years, or realizing that we needed to like pare a bunch of things down, or we're just forced to be kind of more sober and more like brass tacks. We're like, oh, there's some things missing that I really need, that feed me, that I more like flowy things and creative things and just
superfluous almost.
Yeah.
Or what could be seen as superfluous, but
yeah,
you realize that they actually aren't in the face of the situation.
Yeah.
You pared it down, and now you can clearly see what isn't actually superfluous in your life, and like what is imperative to your creativity and your work, your life's work in general.
Yeah, totally. Like your best self. And you're like, I can do this harsh diet, or I can do this harsh meditation routine, or this or that. Like I can strap down and do this budget, and then eventually you're like well, it's like this dynamic between like what your big construction project is versus like how valuable just living living well and living a good lifestyle is, you know?
I could relate to that.
Like you're like, oh, I could sell my motorcycle to get more money to buy more building materials because building this house that I'm building is the priority.
Mm-hmm.
And then you spend the summer, you know, like driving in your car, not having as much fun. You know, at some point you're like, well, do I need to work more to make more money to be more productive? Or do I just need to kind of like make just enough money to kind of buy like fresh, good food and then get to hang out with my family and friends more often, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's like which
country
should you live in? Yeah. We're kind of like, we're speaking like we're making examples out of ourselves. But so, and then the next day after the new moon, so look for that like seeding of all that curious information there. And you might want to kind of just like work with it and play with it, like concentrate as the moon goes to darkness, like on what you're most curious about, and kind of plant some of those seeds like into like what can manifest over the course of the moon cycle. Because right after that, Mercury goes into Cancer, and all this Cancer need nurture stuff we're talking about, which I always been saying to clients this whole year, is to identify that stuff, like find out what your ideal conditions would be to have the best hydroponic tomato of your life. You know, like, you know, if you're like, oh, well, I need to have a coffee shop 2 blocks away, I just know I need that to be part of the like watering system to my hydroponic tomato of like my best art or my best like emotional state, that just to make note of that to like what you need to prioritize to like have all the conditions right to be your best, you know? Even if you don't give it to yourself right away, just start to identify what those things are. And once Mercury goes into Cancer, its topics are going to really swing hard to that direction because the Sun and Venus are still in his sign of Gemini. About to be, because a few days, Venus goes into Gemini on the 8th. And so that's going to, what we're attracted to is going to be ideas and information. And things will get really social, really chatty, really eclectic. And aesthetics are going to like kind of look more towards information and things that are really like lots of different ideas at once, and talk to a lot of people about it. And with the Sun and Gemini be oriented to that search. But it's the reasoning that's driving it behind it, because of where Mercury is in Cancer at that point, is going to be to talk to a lot of people and investigate a lot of ideas to that facilitate you expressing and finding out what those ideal conditions are for your nurturing. You know, that's going to be the kind of wind pushing the sails of the Aries sign of Gemini. The humid and balmy Cancer, kind of like milky fog filling the sails of Aries Gemini. Yeah, like some summertime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Conditions mentally. Do you have any comments? Okay. No. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going too quickly. And then on the 10th, the Sun opposes Jupiter. So then we get like from that like world of that Gemini. Well, first the Sun squares Neptune on the 9th. So, and then, you know, it's moving at a speed that it's going to be sort of squaring Neptune and opposing Jupiter, but Neptune's in Jupiter's sign, which I had the feeling was like, well, that's going to be good Neptune then, because like the greater benefic is ruling it. Like early in the year, I was like, we're going to get all these Neptune aspects over the year, but Neptune is going to be ruled by the greater benefic. And it didn't work out to be as like positive as I thought. It's still Neptune confusing the fuck out of you and like derailing your life with like illusions and fantasies on a huge scale because it's Jupiter, you know. But I think now in this way that it's getting us so lost that that we're finding ourselves towards what we really want. But the process is that like you get like hopelessly lost, you know, like hopelessly lost to the point you're like, I don't think I'll ever get back to like where I was. I'm so lost, but I found something better than where I was headed, you know. Which doesn't typically happen, that you like are driving around in like LA and you're like, man, I can't find the place where we're supposed to go to this party tonight. I think I'm just going to move to San Diego permanently, you know, like, but you know, because I like it better.
Yeah.
But you know, something.
Because I know the streets.
Yeah, yeah, right.
This would never happen in San Diego.
Right, yeah, totally. Yeah. But yeah, something like that, you know. But the 9th and 10th is going to be a big moment for coming to like hitting ultimate confusion and then big coherence and realization and inspiration coming right out of that confusion. So, and it's going to kind of relate to like themes that have been going for the year, like Mercury's extended retrograde in Pisces, going back and forth over Neptune. But this time it's going to kind of be like an irritating, like kind of like, whoa, now I'm really not sure what I'm doing. That's perfect, because I found all this kind of like inspiration and things by like happenstance that gave me a big perspective. Like you're like really lost, and then you suddenly come out of the woods that you're lost in and realize you're on a high spot and you can see over the whole terrain, you know?
Beautiful.
And even that, like, you know, looking over from a vista, like puts in such a romantic quality to what you're looking at. You're not just looking at a landscape, like you're not just looking at a map, you're looking at a landscape that's kind of like filling you up with like there's like emotional content and like from the Pisces side and inspiration, you know, like what's more inspiring than looking over like a beautiful landscape from above, you know? Like you can see where things are laid out, but it's not like looking at the cold information of a map. Yeah. So yeah, just be aware and, you know, use it wisely. And then we get, by the 12th, so we're getting towards mid-month now, we get Mars conjunct the North Node in Cancer. And everything we're saying about like being, this Mars being like overprotective of, you know, like these hydroponic tomato conditions I keep talking about, of like your best life or your best self or your best creativity, where you feel the most safe and productive and able to grow and be yourself, being like kind of like a little like guard dog around those, and being like, don't you get near my hydroponic tomato and mess all this up. I have everything like the way I want it. Lots of themes of being like over, like being protective of your mother, or being at war with your mother, or et cetera, et cetera.
Or like motherly like figures in your life.
Yeah. A lot of mother stuff is going to come up for a lot of people. And then, but all that's true of Mars in Cancer anyway, and Mars is in fall there because it's kind of messy to be like a warrior trying to fight and guard and be tactical around things that are really sensitive and personal. And so civil war is one thing that happens a lot, like in fighting with who you care about, or fighting for or protecting who you care about. But also it's like it's often the heart is in the right place. It just can be like too much fight, too close to too much emotion, you know? But it's going to be different for different people depending on like what Mars does in their chart and what Mars territories do in their chart. Like how, you know, it could be like, it could really fire up your career. It could really fire up your creativity. It could be all about education. It's not just going to be about like the home and the emotion and mothering things, but it like a lot of people that have heavy Cancer placements are authors, because you slowly grow this body of writing and no one sees it till it's finally released and it's born as a publication, you know? So it can be a lot of different things, but Mars on top of the North Node is going to make it insatiably hungry, you know? It's going to be really ready for battle at that point, you know, and really ready to like take some like sensitive territory for itself, you know, like that coffee shop you need to have 2 blocks away to do your best writing, like in your life. You're going to want to take that coffee shop by storm and like demand that like it's your turf, you know, like that kind of thing. And then right after the following day on the 13th, Mercury comes into contact with Rahu, and Mars and Mercury are getting really close to one another, and they're and so like all your thoughts and it's what you're going to want to be talking about, it's what you're thinking about, it's what you're organizing and analyzing, and all of that is opposing Saturn. So by the 14th, Mars opposes Saturn, and it's everything we're just discussing, but in direct sight of all the obligations and restrictions and cost of construction. And so, and with K2 there and Pluto there, you're like, this is the reality of storming that coffee shop or having all the things you need on hand. This is like what it's going to take to build. And this is what you're going to have to get rid of to incorporate that. And with Pluto being there, it's also like, and we don't really know how that's all going to work out. You know, like maybe it'll work. I have no idea. I can't tell, you know? So that's the grind part, but there's a lot of like, there's a lot of that inspiration and like awareness of sensuality and a lot of curiosity all coming through other planets. But this one structure upon the nodal axis is going to be like the kind of like maybe hard but like fired up part about it. Like there are things to get rid of, and there are things to like that you're just drooling over, you know? And then Mars is, then by the 16th, Mercury trines Neptune, which, you know, it's a trine, it's an easy aspect, but Mercury gets really fouled up by Neptune. And so logic and language of providing and preserving perfect growth conditions, harmonizing with illusions and imagination and fantasy, and dissolve of particularities. So this is like some of that like themes of like getting really, really confused and really, really lost and really not knowing what we're doing could be coming in here, and they might seem to jive, but it might be filling your mental pool with a lot of like some of it will be like things you're fantasizing about, and other things will be feeling really disillusioned with things that felt more concrete before.
Yeah.
Because this is right when Mercury opposes Saturn. And so you're like feeling really disillusioned, and you're looking at like the laundry list of things that are really hard, like things that are just like you can't have any control of and you're really obligated to. And then this is right when Jupiter squares Neptune. So we are getting the influence from Jupiter to make that confusion really big, to make those fantasies really big. And then the moon conjoins Jupiter at the same time. So it's like our emotions are really wrapped up in that inspiration. And a lot of this to me looks like, one way I've been thinking about it is the growing pains of dreaming bigger than we allowed ourselves to dream before. Jupiter's brought in like new inspiration to dream like new things that we want to accomplish. And it's just the balloon is just hitting the edges of the room that Saturn is, holding. And the South Node is saying like, if this bubble is going to get bigger, we're going to need to like take some of these walls down. And Pluto is like, well, the problem is we don't know what's on the other side of the wall, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like I was describing it as kind of like that kind of like when you're getting bigger and your body's changing and you feel awkward about it, and even it kind of hurts, and like your clothes don't fit you anymore, and your bed's too small, and your bedroom is a kid's room, and you're
an adult now.
You're an adult now, and the things you have seem like toys rather than tools, and you're ready to like. Yeah,
you said you feel like you're in kindergarten, but you're like ready for your to get your PhD.
Yeah, it's like, guess what? You're not ready for kindergarten. You're going to be held back in preschool one more year, and you're like, motherfucker, I'm ready for a PhD. Like, let's do this.
Yeah.
You know, I have a thesis. You know, like, and that's that like Mars being over hungry for growth and being kind of like a baby with a loaded gun.
Right.
You know, some of it is true. Some of it is just you're overamped. You know, but it's all ultimately like we're going to need to make space for this growth, or else the bubble's going to pop. You know.
For sure.
Especially, yeah. So that's a lot of what we're dealing. It's those dynamics that are going to continue and come to come to directly to your front door, come like directly to a head in July. They're all just flying through this mid Jupiter period, and it was really funny that we're talking about this like balloon thing because of that video you showed me from the runway.
Yeah.
From yesterday.
That artist
making like inflatable balloon outfits.
Yeah, the balloon. I can't remember his name right now. Here it is. It's Frederick. Geranson. How would you say that?
Frederick Geranson.
We're totally saying it wrong, but
because it's like the last name we're looking at like a TJAERANDSEN.
But he just did his show. He's a student at Central Saint Martin, and he did his show, and all the models came out in these balloons that deflated and then were dresses. And that was definitely making me think of everything that I had been reading that you wrote about also just protecting what's yours, like being in this like little bubble.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're ready to get out, and even when the dresses deflate, there's still this space around the wearer it's not like the dress becomes skin tight. The dress still has 6 inches like all around, this kind of buffer.
It's like filled with air.
Buffer to the outside world. Or just like lumps. They're very, very beautiful.
And
it's an interesting show that's worth
It seemed
seeing.
to occur, or at least get posted, right during the Jupiter Mercury opposition.
It happened yesterday, yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny the the Mercury one thing changing into another thing, and the Jupiter inflating, and
yeah, who's his astrologer?
I don't know. Yeah, totally. Yeah, if you're listening to this, get in touch. You know?
I'll interview you.
Right. So, right after all that bojazz I'm talking about on the 16th, we get, because part of that is the moon conjoining Jupiter, that, our need to get perspective from using imagination to combine elements toward a greater purpose. That Sagittarius kind of well, I'm going to mash this into this and create this hybrid thing. A lot of hybridization, which is, I think, part of the confusion that we've been going through with the extended Mercury retrograde in Pisces is left us with this soup of oh, now all our things are just this mess, and we're well, I have this and this, how can I put them together so they make sense? Kind of some of it's getting pulled in different directions and having to get rid of some things, but also how can I make I want
a decent meal out of this,
right? Yeah,
out of this mess.
Yeah, I want to live on this island. I have a car and I have a canoe, but and
how do I get the car over to the island?
Yeah, can I have a canoe?
Right.
That the island is actually really big and I have to drive around it a lot. So once I get there, I'll need the car. So I need a canoe. Sorry about that one. But so then we get the full moon in Sagittarius right as this is all coming to culmination of a cycle of need to combine elements to reach higher goals. And, just moon Sagittarius, this is the full moon in Sagittarius, the year that Jupiter is in Sagittarius, with the moon separating from a conjunction with Jupiter, the dignified ruler of the domicile. So this is this is like an event, like, back in October of 2018, it's like, oh, Jupiter's in Sagittarius. When's the full moon in Sagittarius going to be?
And
And
that's
so,
coming up.
yeah, so that's it. So like, it's going to be really easy it's going to be like definitely about, over like the cornucopia brimming over full. And since it got seeded in Gemini, it could be the cornucopia brimming over full with information and knowledge and ideas, and it's, it would be a really good time to like feast on, have your wine and like whatever else, your wine and bread and roast meat and like your big banquet table, certainly, but really make sure to like feast on philosophy and spirituality and religious ideas and become higher minded, because it's a good time to get like lots of perspective from.
I definitely love that aspect of Jupiter. It's sometimes, well, I was overlooking it at first when we were making the talismans. The second talisman I made is more focused on that aspect because it's essential.
It'll do so much more. It can do so much good for you. Like, you could make a Jupiter wealth talisman if the conditions are right. And if the conditions are right, you could make one for just a higher philosophical understanding. And that can actually get you out of a lot more sticky situations in the end. Like, when you're like...
And just having to, like, work all the time.
Yeah,
like, maintain that wealth.
Right. Yeah, or like, you're like, oh, I have some extra bucks, that's handy.
Or work a job that you don't like. I mean, everybody...
Yeah. That's it's this new opportunity to like have more wealth or something, more abundance, but you can hit sticky situations where you're like, man, I don't know how to unravel all this, like this extended Mercury retrograde causing all that confusion in Pisces. Like, I don't really know what to do with all of this, but I've obtained this like superior philosophy and spiritual state, so I'm actually fine to ride this one out. Like,
absolutely,
it's going to jailbreak you out of a lot more hard situations than you might at first realize, that you can, more than you can maybe buy yourself out of.
Yeah, beyond bail money.
Beyond bail money is the name of this
beyond
episode.
Bail bucks.
So so then on the 18th, Mercury conjoins Mars finally. So all that stuff that you've been thinking about along these Cancerian lines, this is when you're going to be spitting fire, like your words are going to like be weaponized, and your thinking is going to, you're going to be planning your attack, and your words are going to be like, have some burn to them. So yeah, be aware of that. It's a good time to
like. We're talking about being sensitive to that, like, and being in a place that it can be used. Not if you can avoid being somewhere where you might be around people that you would say harmful things to.
Right. Yeah.
Try to avoid that.
Take your Carnu out to your island.
Totally.
Like at this
yeah,
point,
you definitely want to take the Carnu out that day.
But just by the way astrology works, this might be when you have to have your confrontation.
It's true.
And so just be mindful of what kind of energy is afoot as you're confronting.
Stay cool.
You're confronting your mom or something.
Absolutely.
So then the next day Mercury opposes Pluto and Mars opposes Pluto. So we've kind of like sketched this out. So we're just kind of going through the dates at this point. But yeah, it's like this is, whereas like Mercury and Mars looking at Saturn is looking at like the hard realities. Looking at K2 right after is like looking at what needs to get purged and dismantled. And then looking at Pluto is dealing with the idea that you don't really know what's on the other side. There's fears, there's voids, there's unknowns, there's unprecedented situations in managing things in the structure or dealing with the systems around you. And it's going to take some like kind of detective work, some like real like sleuthing to kind of figure some of that out. And that's going to be its own kind of underworld journey. Like you're going to have to kind of get your torch and like enter the labyrinth to kind of figure that one out. And that's so you just kind of have to like go beyond those barriers of fear and not be paralyzed by them. or be obsessed with them. Then by the 21st, the sun ingresses Cancer, and then this is the summer solstice, which normally would be like, oh, it's the summer solstice, that's the thing to talk about. But it's like pretty, it's pretty like outshined by a lot of this other stuff. But the summer solstice also always has like loads of significance, and we'll probably talk about that in another episode. I think we're going to do an herbal episode, and that's where we're going to probably talk a lot about like the herbs of the solstice and the magic of the solstice. So just hop over to that episode to like get more into like St. John's Eve and all of the like
the merriment
and hallucinatory ecstatic activity that you can get involved in. Then on the 23rd, Venus opposes Jupiter. And great, right? Like Venus opposite Jupiter, attraction to opposites and to paradox balanced with philosophy of hybridization for a higher purpose. So the 23rd is not a bad point, like the full moon on the 17th, which you might want to be kind of digging on late on the 16th before it's
like 4 a.m.
Yeah, it's 4 a.m. on the 17th. So this is another one, the 23rd. If like you want to like schedule something nice, like you can, and I'm not talking like full elections, but if you want, you're like, oh, what day should we have the the Johnsons over? Like, oh, like the Sunday the 23rd looks like we're gonna have a great time,
Lovely.
And yeah, I'm excited. And a lot more significance than just that, but I think like I said, the mid-month is so weighty. We're just like, whew, like Venus opposite Jupiter, we really needed this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a lot to take in. So just keep your receptors open, because any of these Jupiter aspects, you're getting some good information. And good information from like ideas you're really attracted to, or like media you're really excited about, or people you're really excited about talking with, or like riddles, because it's Venus, it's coming from Venus in Gemini. And then Monday we get Venus square Neptune, so not surprisingly, right after like Venus gets really pumped up and expanded and inflated with Jupiter, it goes into like it hits like a jam, like a tension point of like fantasy, so like you're like, oh yeah, you got really like the Johnsons came over, you got really excited about these paradoxical ideas that were just blowing your mind and expanding your horizons. You were like making plans to like travel across the world to pursue some of these things that you just find out about, and suddenly you realize that your attraction to opposites and paradoxes is in tension with illusion and fantasy and the dissolve of particularities. Like again, like things getting like real, like this is where like the alarm comes in. Be like, whoa, things are getting really diluted now, but great for art, it's a great art signal.
Depending on your style,
yeah. You're right. If you're like a hardcore like realist, you might be like, man, this looks insane. But yeah, so just find the right place to put this stuff. Like it's gonna come in from like emotion and ideas and things that are rousing the spirit. So just find the right place to place them all in your life. And finally, Mercury goes into Leo, which we'll talk about a bunch more about next month. But, Mercury in Leo on the 26th.
How long is that for?
Mercury. Let me get up the...
Well, it doesn't matter. You said we'd talk about it next month.
Oh, whoops. Mercury in Leo, the 26th of June until... like the 29th of August.
Oh, wow.
Because Mercury's going to go retrograde back into Cancer, back to 28th like around the 20 into the 20s in Cancer. So yeah, July, we're going to get the eclipses and that Mercury retrograde. So yeah, we'll talk a bunch about that next month. But, you know, Mercury in Leo, a lot of language and logic of visibility, of being seen and communicating, especially in a performative way, that sets certain examples or certain images of yourself, you know?
Makes me think of dance or...
Yeah, dance, performance, magic, like stage magic. But yeah, so yeah, it's interesting to see what you're thinking about after a month that really like brings in a bunch of new ideas and gets you like inspired, but also is like a major pain in the ass and has you really defensive and protective and facing realities, but like getting really like inflated with like what you're ultimately really excited about. This is kind of like I said, the growing pains period. And then we see as things move into Leo next, you're going to be starting to try to show off peacock out some of the things you've gained from June, and then especially that'll carry into after the eclipses as well, like which are going to be like, you know, as we're saying, in Cancer and Capricorn this year, opposed to where they've been for the previous year and a half in Leo and Aquarius. So we're going to get kind of like after this whole dynamic we've been discussing about all the like nurturing and safe space and need to grow versus like obligations and what needs to be dismantled and going on beyond fear of what we're constructing. Then we're going to be moving into these Leo periods for a while where we get to like show off how we came to be the person we are after these shakeups.
Strut our stuff.
And so thanks for joining us and maybe in spirit of that, we'll like, maybe at some point we'll start doing video so like we can strut our stuff, like when you listen to it, do the forecast and see us drink espresso and hang out with our cats.
Be pretty boring.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll have to do like really good makeup before we record.
Yeah, we make like creative backdrops.
Yeah, creative backdrops.
That we like that are kind of revolving.
Yeah, totally a revolving backdrop because we're not really doing anything. We're just sitting here.
We're just no wood stove.
We'll get some jugglers.
Juggalos.
Anyways, back to the forecast episodes. I'm glad that we're doing them again. Hope you enjoy them, and we're going to try to keep on this schedule every month. And join us next time. Thanks a lot.